Welcome, everyone, to another recorded Aftershock. I know many of you look forward to these, and I am excited to have with me the man at SounderAtHeart. I mean, you got a whole team there, Jeremiah, but you are the guy. And, basically, you're almost like Quakes Epicenter, but for the Sounders, and you guys do way more articles than we do. That much I know. We maybe do a bit more video than you do, but I am excited to have you on the show. How are you doing, Jeremiah?
I'm doing well. And I'll note to your readers, I am a South Bay native. I grew up in Gilroy. I went to school at San Jose State. I lived almost my entire life in the South Bay area until I moved to Seattle in 2009. So I built up like 30 odd years of South Bay cred.
I mean, I just did your show. Now you're doing my show, and we talked about Deanne's of Force on there. So I think that's pretty good South Bay cred right there when you know Deanne's of Force. Look, these are exciting times for the Seattle Sounders. And what's really, really weird is that they're in 11th place in the Western Conference. But man, Garth Lagerwey is super fired up about the opportunity for this team to potentially be the first MLS team to win CCL. I'll actually be at the game. I'm going to go with a friend of mine, Harrison Crow from American Soccer Analysis. We're going to sit in the upper deck area. No press box, niceties for me. I know you guys have amazing food there. But, this organization's just got to be hyped up about CCL. How's everyone feeling?
They are hyped up about it. Garth, if you missed it, Garth gave like a Vince McMahon-esque speech.
Yeah, good way of putting it.
Before the game, and it was, we couldn't hear it in the press box. Apparently, most people couldn't hear it in the stands, but the video finally came out yesterday, and it is, it's like a purposefully epic speech. He calls it like a chance to become immortal, and if you're gonna go to one more game in your life, you should go to this game. It was, hyperbole up and down, but I think, it was hyperbole, but it was based in truth. I think the Sounders do consider this a massive deal. They are looking at it sort of as a final, if nothing, like beyond the achievement and beyond the trophy and beyond the literal, you are going to be, if the Sounders win this, they will be the first MLS team to win this competition. That will never change. So there is some level of immortality in that. But beyond that, they're also looking at it as like a final pitch for their candidacy to host World Cup games in 2026. I don't know that realistically this is going to impact it one way or the other, but that's the way they're approaching this. That's the importance that they're placing on it. It is, I think they have hope that they can get 69,000 into Lumen Field for their leg. I think a lot of that's going to depend on how the first leg goes. But as it sits today, they've sold 50,000 tickets, and it will be a rocking atmosphere. And, I think the focus of the team, I guess what I'm trying to say, is on the CCL final.
Yeah. Well, look, I live up here. I'm excited to go to a CCL final. I guess I will be Rob Lowe wearing my, MLS hat instead of the NFL hat, right? And go like, yay, MLS. But I can kind of envision a world where there's probably a few Timbers fans who are kind of like go Liga MX. I mean,
yes.
Would you be pro MLS if the shoe was on the other foot and it was the Timbers in a CCL final?
No way.
No way.
There's not even a shred of doubt that, and I say this selfishly because, the Sounders have sort of like targeted this thing for a decade.
Yeah.
And so the idea of being able to be first is still like a really relevant thing for the Sounders. And so I don't know, I guess there are some teams out there, like I want to say, like back when RSL was the finalist in 2011, I think it was, there was a sense of like, hey, let's get all behind MLS and we want to kind of a rising tide lifts all boats type of perspective. Maybe Montreal I was rooting for a little bit. Maybe even LAFC I kind of was like,
that was a good LAFC team too.
Yeah, it was good, and I wasn't rooting against them. But for sure, if it was the Timbers, I'd come to the game wearing a Pumas jersey.
I feel like Quakes fans are going to be split on this, to be quite honest. I think a lot of them view Seattle as like the mortal enemy. But man, I mean, come on, up against like, some of the other teams in the league, I don't see it quite as much. And maybe it's because I'm up here and I'm a little bit like, I see the Sounders. I hear people talking about the Sounders and things like that. And I'm kind of, in it a little bit more, but, doesn't quite feel that way for me. I think like it's time. And this team, I believe from everything I've seen about them, and I probably besides the Quakes see more Sounders than any other team in MLS, feels like the team, and that LAFC team was also very good. And yes, Toronto, I think a few years back was also very good, but this team seems like they really can do it. And I think a Pumas team that is, beatable. I think that's also a big part of this as well.
Yeah, and I think from a like if I'm taking my Sounders hat off, I think just looking at these teams on paper, we've never had a matchup that favors the MLS team the way that this matchup favors the MLS
I agree.
team. The Sounders have more experience. They have arguably more talent. They have a deeper roster. You go down the list, they have more recent success. They've been in big games more recently. There's every reason to believe that the Sounders have the advantages that the Liga MX teams traditionally have. The only thing that is working against them is that there does seem to be sort of this air about Mexican teams that they just believe they're going to win these types of games, and MLS has not earned the right to feel the same way yet. And in that way, I suppose this series could potentially change that dynamic. It could change that paradigm. If the Sounders were to go down to Mexico City and get a win in Mexico City, I believe they would be the first American club team to do that in Mexico City. But it's so like, a lot of things can change, and I think it would be very convenient for this to happen before the League's Cup starts. When all of a sudden, once the League's Cup starts, there's going to start to be all sorts of different dynamics at play between these two leagues, I think. But if the Sounders can win this, sort of plant their flag as like legitimate CCL champions, I think that does start to sort of change the narrative and potentially send MLS on a trajectory where they can regularly stand toe to toe with Liga MX. And maybe even with fans. I mean, let's not forget that Liga MX is still the most popular league in the United States. The Mexican national team might be the most popular team in the United States. And for U.S. soccer to really ever rise to the levels that it aspires to, it can't have that be the case.
Yeah, it can't just be like squeak by Mexico in a few games in claim superiority.
Right.
You're going to have to be able to do it at the club level as well and establish MLS as a legitimate league up against Liga MX, as you've mentioned there. So, but let's turn our attention to Quakes and Sounders, because that's what we have right in front of us this week. The Earthquakes, winless in MLS play, new head coach Alex Cavello. He's been the head of methodology within the Earthquakes for several years. But fans are just now in many ways learning about him for the first time, because he's kind of been in that background. But in developing these academy teams, which have been, becoming very good, congratulations to the Sounders U17s for winning the GA Cup, I think the second time. And but what's that?
Second year.
Yeah.
Yeah, they won in 2019. They wasn't played in 2020.
And that was, there you go. That was actually then that answers that question, because I was actually wondering why I heard someone say straight and then use 2019. So yes, I mean, it's great to see GA Cup back, number one. But the Quakes U17s have played the Sounders U17s and won. So this is becoming like the cream of the crop now on the academy side. But Alex Cavello now has to show this at the professional level. He's going to be flanked by Steve Ralston. He's going to be flanked by Chris Wondolowski, also Luciano Fusco, who has a college background and was the Quakes 2 assistant, is also a part of his staff. And I think what we're going to see is moving away from man marking and into something that's going to feel a little bit more quote unquote, like traditional from a defensive perspective, a bit more structure in the back. And that seems to come at a good time because the Quakes have been just leaking these crazy transition type goals. And everyone knows the Sounders, one of the best transition teams in the league, and have been for a number of years. You've only added to the weapons with Albert Rusnak this year. How is all this looking, and why do you think the Sounders from a club perspective are sitting in 11th right now as compared to their traditional spot toward the top of the conference?
Well, I think there's a few things going on. One is, they're 2-3-1 in league play, which is not great, obviously, but they're 5-3-1 overall, or 5-3-3 overall, 5-3-4 overall, actually. So it's like if you look at if you include their Champions League record, you get a much more, it's like I want to say they would be third in goal difference, and they would be seventh in the Supporters Shield standings on a points per game basis.
Okay.
And in a goal difference per game basis. So it's not like they have been bad, but they have absolutely sacrificed some results in league play due to rotation, due to injury, they haven't been able to field their, I guess what the point I'm making is they haven't really been able to field their best teams in league play. The Inter Miami game being a prime example where they rotated 10 players out of the lineup that tied New York City FC in the second leg of the Champions League. So I think their league record is a little deceiving when they've been able to get everyone on the field together, which hasn't been that many times. But they looked absolutely great against Minnesota United, which was one of the first times that they got sort of like their primary front six on the field together. It may have been actually the first time that they got all six of those players onto the field. And it may have only been five, but they looked great against Minnesota United. Then they backed that up with another outstanding performance at home against New York City FC. So, you can see how it works when it's all supposed to fit together. It's just that they haven't been able to fit that all together as much as they would like. But I think we're going to see something close to that first choice lineup against the Earthquakes, because they are very aware that most of those players sat against Inter Miami last week. They're very aware that it doesn't really do them any good to sit them again and to have them kind of coming off of an extended break going into the Pumas game. So I think they're looking at this, even if they're not looking at it from a purely competitive perspective, they just need to get these guys minutes. But I also think that they are aware that they need to start picking up points in league play. Like you said, 10 points from 7 games looks a whole lot better than 7 points from 7 games, which is what they would be on if they were to lose this one. And I don't think anyone's panicking about the league table right now, but they are very aware that they are dropping points that, in games that they should be gaining points and losing, no offense to the Earthquakes, but they have, this is a team that they've done very well against recently, and they absolutely expect themselves to be able to get results on the road or at home against the Earthquakes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that would be completely fair given the more recent history. That's the way that they would look at it. How is Albert Rusnak fitting into this lineup? Has it been like, a perfect fit? Has it been something that's needed a bit of tweaking, a bit of rework? Because one of the things that I felt in bringing him in was that it wasn't clear to me what he had that already didn't exist in this lineup. So, how has that worked? And, is that taking potentially when he's on the ball away from other players who are just as dangerous as he is? How is this kind of sharing of the wealth happening so far?
Early on in the season, I think that was a very fair observation, and maybe it's still a fair observation. But yeah, they tried him a bunch of different places. He has played as a 10. He's played on the right, but he's really settled into more of an 8 in sort of a double pivot with João Paulo in a 4-2-3-1. And so when he's been able to be deployed in that specific way as an 8 in a 4-2-3-1, he has looked very good. He's a connector. He's able to get forward when he needs to get forward. He's someone that can distribute well. He covers a lot of ground. He's not necessarily a great tackler or a great defensive player, but he's active. And sometimes that activity is almost as important as it can almost be as effective as actually being a good tackler. It's not exactly, but you know what I'm saying? Like he's able to like not just let players have an easy time in the midfield, even if he's not necessarily winning all the tackles. But yeah, I think that actually is a role that suits him well. Time will tell how, whether he ends up getting exploited there or not, I suppose. But for now, I think the Sounders are very happy to use him in that way, and he's looked pretty good, when deployed that way.
Okay. I'm bumping up against a hard stop here, but before we go, I do want to talk a little bit of Open Cup because just this morning, the Open Cup draw revealed that the Earthquakes are going to get to play up at StarFire, the site of the Red Card Wedding, for those who know what I'm talking about, and be able to play the Seattle Sounders in the fourth round of the Open Cup. Now I'm excited because I'm up here, and I think fans know that now, and so getting to actually see the Earthquakes play up here before decision day and not too far up the road is exciting for me personally. But the StarFire record of the Sounders would indicate that I probably, from a Quakes perspective, shouldn't be too excited about this, Jeremiah. How are the Sounders been at StarFire in their history in these Open Cup type games?
So I will note that they haven't actually been able to play at StarFire since 2017 for a variety of reasons. 2018, they only went on, I think they just went on the road. Their first game was on the road. 2019, they happened to host their first game at Tacoma, where at the time it looked like they were going to be sort of moving all of their Open Cup games. That's obviously not the case at this point. And then it wasn't played the last 2 years. But from, I think they started playing there, I want to say in 2006 in the USL era. And they played there as their almost exclusive home until 2017 when they, like I said, when they played that game, when the next game they played in Tacoma. And during that time, they went 21-1 in Open Cup games, which spans the MLS and USL eras. That one tie, though, the loss was the red card winning. The tie, which was, the way it goes down in the record books, but that was actually against the Earthquakes. I think that's the only time the Earthquakes have played at StarFire. So the Earthquakes actually have a decent history, all things considered, at StarFire. The Sounders won that game in a shootout. And your viewers may or may not know this, or remember this, but that was the game that Marcus Hahnemann saved a penalty, went to the beer stand and basically traded his jersey for a beer and then chugged a beer on the field. And that was the last time that he actually played a competitive game. So that's kind of a cool story, a cool connection to the Earthquakes. That game, if you want to go back and look at it, it's wild. It had something like 60 fouls in it. It had 45 shot. I mean, it was an absolutely crazy cage match of a game. And so I don't know if that's what we'll get here, but it was sort of at the height of the Bash Brothers sort of style of play that they were doing down in San Jose.
Well, two teams that came into NASL in 1974 both claim 74 as their history. And as a result, they have this Heritage Cup between them. Now, this is a huge, huge cup. Clearly, this is the priority.
It is literally.
It is a very big cup. And I know this is a priority for the Sounders up against the Cascadia Cup, up against Open Cup, up against CCL and the potential of winning CCL, up against the Supporters Shield and MLS Cup. I know the Heritage Cup is way up there. But frankly, these teams do have a lot of history. And when they're both competitive, the games, to your point, can actually be crazy and quite exciting. And I think in the Almeida era, there were even a couple of those barn burners too. But I am kind of looking forward to getting back to something that more resembles a soccer match and kind of seeing, how this goes with the two teams out there. What are the chances, just give the Earthquakes fans a little bit of hope here, what are the chances that the Sounders are looking a little bit past the Earthquakes and a little bit too much at Pumas next week?
I mean, I definitely think that there is a chance that they are looking past the Earthquakes from a mental perspective. I don't know that they could avoid that. I mean, the reality is this is a huge match coming up. And I think that I think there's absolutely a chance of it. I think from a personnel perspective, I don't think that's going to happen. I also think that, unfortunately for the Earthquakes, I think losing to Miami probably does make it a little bit more likely that the Sounders are going to be more focused on this game, because they know they can't just keep dropping points in league. And because no matter what happens in CCL, they absolutely believe that they have to make the playoffs, that they have to be competitive for MLS Cup. So like they aren't willing to just sort of throw away the season and call it a success if they just by getting to the final. So yeah, I mean, I think my expectation is the Sounders will come in focused and be ready to play, and we'll probably use something like a first choice lineup. But I don't think that guarantees anything. And I absolutely think there is a chance that their mind will be a little bit wandering.
Well, we're about to find out if put in some defensive structure. Is this going to be a good Earthquakes team, or at least a mid-table Earthquakes team? We're going to find out, because a lot of us have thought that by adding a bit of defensive structure rather than the man marking, that probably this team has enough talent to compete for a playoff spot in the West. The problem is the Earthquakes only have 3 points from the 6 games that they've played so far, all draws, and it's going to be difficult for them, I think, to be able to make playoffs at this point. Not impossible, but very difficult. And so we're about to find out, though, I think, what the upside of this team is. And there is no bigger test in this league, I don't believe, than the Seattle Sounders. So, Jeremiah, we'll both be covering this one from our respective places, and should be quite interesting. And I think it's with the backdrop of CCL and everything else that's going on for the Sounders. Maybe we can get this rivalry going again ahead of Open Cup and get another wild Open Cup as a result.
Sure. Yeah. I think that I'm looking forward to the Open Cup game for sure. I think it's actually going to be kind of fun.
All right. Looking forward to it too. We'll see you there. Thanks for joining us today. Fans, be sure to follow Jeremiah, and SounderAtHeart is his website. So you can follow them as well. But Jeremiah Oshan on Twitter. Jeremiah, thanks again for joining us today. Fans, if you enjoy these videos, please like, subscribe, notify, turn on those notifications so that you'll get notified. That's the most important thing there. And of course, check out our Patreon that we've got. Jeremiah, once again, good to talk to you, and we will maybe see you at CCL or at the Open Cup here very soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, take care.